Well, this is part 3 of my Great West Road video. So welcome back. The fly goes in my ear. Now, in 1932, if you were standing here, which is the corner of Boston Manor Road and the Great West Road, you would have been confronted by the new McLean's factory. McLean's as in McLean's, the toothpaste company, but they also made various other bits and pieces, things like stomach powders, that sort of stuff. They eventually became part of Beecham's, and then Beecham's took over the building, but it was a lovely low-scale Art Deco building which had a fountain in the front of it, and so this sat on the corner and then stretched out down Boston Manor Road and along the Great West Road. It's, as you can see, something else is going to happen soon, and it's a development called Hadley Brentside, and obviously it's going to be lots of apartment blocks, quite tall to match stuff of that height. That building there is now called the Mile or Millie, I presume because it's 1000 Great West Road. It was originally put up as an office block for Turriff Construction in the 1960s. It looked very different because it's been reclad. In between that, in the 1980s, the 90s, it was Wang Computer, I think. How about that? On the other side of the road is what is called Great West House, and it's been converted into apartments. Everything's been converted into apartments, and that was originally put up in the early 1960s for the Honeywell company, who made computers, and then it became Honeywell Bull. And then it's something else, I don't know, but it's been converted into housing. It had sort of a refascia done with all this funny strange steelwork, but up to that point it was fairly boring. Now what stood on that site originally was, and along a bit, was the Jansen knitting mills. Jansen, the American company, and their primary thing they made was knitted swimming costumes, believe it or not. And it was a low-scale building that was built around about 1930, thereabouts, 32, and it was done in a very sort of strange, slightly antiquated style compared to everything else down this road, but it was supposed to be a replica of the American building in America for Jansen Mills, the original Jansen Mills. And one of the notable things about it was an illuminated sign which stood on some steelwork, which was the logo of the company, which is a lady diving, wearing one of their swimming costumes. You can see that elevator going down there, so stripping out that building in a fairly major way. I don't know what it's going to end up looking like. Anyway, so that was Jansen Mills, and they were there until about 1960 when they relocated to the West Country, and then that was built just beyond, on the other side of the junction of the road. There was originally a church, which I think was a Victorian church. So you can't see anything here. But when I get to the end of these hoardings, which are obviously announcing this great new change, yet more change on the Great West Road. So we've gone from basically, as I said in the previous video, agriculture, open land, with some housing, but then we move into the industrial era, and then we move into the office era in the 1960s when lots of offices went up, high-rise stuff. And now we're going through another change because those offices are no longer required. Companies don't necessarily want to be down here for whatever reason. And yeah, this is a particularly notable example. When they pulled down the original McLean's factory buildings, McLean's, the Beecham's had quit out of that building around about 1969. It was taken over by Rank Audio Visual. And then in the year 2000, I think this building started to go up. I believe originally it was going to be for Samsung, but then GlaxoSmithKline took it. It's mirror glass, as you can see, because all the clouds reflected. And they left last year. You see the British and American flags for Glaxo and SmithKline still flying. But this, it looks like, is going to come down unless they convert some of it. So it's only been there for 25 years. Incredible, isn't it? Showpiece building. And I think that was the last hurrah for the Great West Road in terms of commercial activity, because now it is just going to be housing. On the other side of the road, just beyond where that cement mixer is, that was originally the site of the Sperry Gyroscopic Works. And Sperry was a company that dealt with as you can tell. Gyroscopic systems, guidance systems, compasses. They were a very, very important company, an American company. They also built searchlights, and they used to actually test the searchlights on the top of the office building, apparently. It's a great shame, really. I mean, I remember when this building was going up, that was something amazing, and now it's going. Here we go, look, look. Golden Mile Centenary. There we are. Now, I did wonder why Hounslow Council were making such a thing about the 100 years of Great West Road, but that looks like the reason why. It's tied in with a developer. As so much is, I suppose always has been. So this is the third video. I hope I can actually try and do a maximum of 4. It really shouldn't be more than that. This is the best section of the Great West Road in terms of how it sort of used to look, and it hasn't got the horrible elevated section running above it. So this is more like how the Great West Road was as it was originally built. And I think it was actually this wide. It had to be this wide. So you're looking at a 6-lane motorway. So they really thought far ahead when you consider that this was originally being drawn up as an idea at the end of the Victorian era. They could think that far ahead of things. Now, I can't really show you because it's all hoarding here, but next to where McLean's was, there was in fact originally a building that was originally for a company that made packaging materials. The name has gone out of my head, which is a terrible thing to admit to. Norris Thompson. They were here from the early 30s through until I think the 50s, and then the building was taken over by Trico. Now Trico used to make, probably still do actually if it still exists, windscreen wipers. They pretty much cornered the market, had a monopoly of windscreen wipers being made in this country and supplying to the British motor industry. It was an American company. The most notable thing about Trico's existence here, from a popular culture point of view, is in 1976 there was a strike that lasted months, and it was to do with fair pay for the women workers, the female workers. This is the Grand Union Canal, believe it or not. The building you can see in the distance there, that, if I try and zoom into it, is the Sky building, Sky TV, Sky Digital, whatever you want to call them these days. This is Westlink House, I think it's called Westlink House. Profile West, sorry. Now, I'm trying to remember who was on this site before, and it's gone out of my head, which is a terrible thing, again, to admit to, but I don't think there's anything of particular note. Over here, this is a continuation of where the Sperry Works was, but then there was also, I think, a company that dealt with cement. But the next building that is of particular note, and this is, a bit like the factory building in the previous video that I said was, one of the real showpieces, this is the next one. This was originally put up for Currys. Let's just zoom in a bit so you can see it better. In 1936, Currys, yes, the same company that still exists. It wasn't a factory, it was more of a warehousing and office and distribution and workshops, repair workshops, because Currys, he said Dixon's, they dealt with radios, bicycles, camping equipment and other electrical bits and pieces. So basically they were doing repairs and all sorts of maintenance stuff, as well as just warehousing and distribution and offices. This building went up 36 and it was designed by Wallace Gilman, who of course did the building further down the road, Wallace House. It was restored and sort of converted for JC Deco, so you can see the name at the top of it, the signage company, the advertising hoardings. They do stuff like on bus stops and all sorts of places. Very important company, and you can see all the various countries they operate in. Clock tower at the top, just a classic sort of industrial building of its time, and very stylish too. And it's really nice to see that it was saved, that it was restored, repurposed, and I don't think that's going anywhere. I mean, they can do all sorts of things like build on the back of buildings, but that's not going anywhere. This is Transport Avenue. It's called Transport Avenue because that runs up to a railway line that originally crossed over the road. Very, very busy with big trucks here. So this is like concrete, waste, all sorts of heavy stuff that's been put through there onto train. It's like a train terminal. Nice, warm, actually hot, late June day. And I've taken the day off work to do this, actually, not purposely just this alone, but one of the many things. This building here, I can't remember who it was for originally, but it was probably it is a nondescript building of its time. Probably late 50s. Interesting in its own way with a different use of bricks. But for life of me, I've forgotten what that was for. I mean, I'm only really covering the sort of really notable stuff. It's not supposed to be a complete gazetteer of industrial buildings. It's just talking about the stuff that, when I did the radio stop on the Robert Helms programme, it's a radio programme, so I can't show anything. It's really frustrating. So this is just a way of being able to make up for that. So the building we're now looking at, which I should have said, is the Pyrene building. It's not called that anymore, it's called Westlink House. But it was originally built for the American fire extinguisher company, Pyrene. And that was opened about 1930. I always think it's 1928, and I don't know why, but obviously it was not as early as that. Again, it's a Wallace Gilbert and Partners building, I believe. I'm fairly sure it is. If it's not, please tell me otherwise. Now here, this mound of earth, this was originally a railway embankment, and there was a bridge that ran across the road. It was a steel bridge, and it ran over the other side of the road, and that would have carried on to Brentford Docks. So in fact it is an extension of that bit on Transport Avenue. The line would have carried on. If you have a look at overhead maps, you can see how it stops, but it would have carried on and gone on its way to Brentford and Brentford Docks. And that's for a very important reason, because these manufacturers needed various things to come in on the train, heavy stuff, in particular the company I'm also going to mention in a second. So I can have a look at the Pyrene building again in a second close up, and we might actually go over the road bridge. Perhaps we'll do that and we can make that into the next video, because it's going to take a while. This is where the Firestone factory was. Yep, that's right, and they're rebuilding. So the building that replaced the Firestone factory, which was pulled down in 1980, everybody knows about that story. You can read about it, you can do. The only surviving parts of the factory are the gatehouses, which you can see just at the end there, just peeking through the bushes. The gateposts, the lamps, the fencing, the columns that run along. The rest of it all went. This Curry's was originally, I believe, a do-it-all DIY, and if you want to be really nerdy, somewhere on the internet, probably on YouTube, there is an advert for Do-It-All featuring Daniel Peacock of all people in the video, and they are sort of outside the front of this when it was a Do-It-All. Far too much nerdy stuff. So yeah, the building that went on the top of the old site of the Firestone factory, which I've forgotten the name of, terribly sorry, but it was a very bland, typical building of its time, so it's like actually designed in the 70s presumably, and yeah, they pulled that down recently and they're putting up something which is called Firestone, believe it or not. West Cross, that's what it was called, West Cross House. These are, I believe, original and very, very Art Deco. So you've got all this lovely fluting on the side. I mean, really, you couldn't get more Art Deco than that, could you, in terms of a lump of concrete or dressed stone. So this footbridge, I think, has been here for quite a few years. I mean, I like this building in particular. This is a real gem, the Pyrene building. Now, I can tell you again, if I can, I'll stick it into the notes at the end. There is a video, there's some video, original film footage from 1930 when it was opened, and it features a delegation, a huge delegation of people who've come to see the opening of this building, and presumably some of those people would have been from the original Pyrene Company of America, all turning up as motor coaches, cars all lined along the side of the road, and you then close up to people going up the steps. Some of them were wearing top hats, waistcoats, typical sort of how perhaps people who were in high positions at that point would have dressed for these formal occasions, and they handing over the key to open up the building. And that is a wonderful bit of footage, and it actually does show you the building next to it, which I will try and cover a bit later in the next video, because I'm going to have to do 4, aren't I? Which was the business of Leonard, I think it was Leonard Williams, William Leonard, I can't remember now, but it was originally the Packard showrooms and workshops, the Packard American motor company. So, not seeing an awful lot here, are we? What I need to do is I'm just going to pause and go up onto this bridge. Right, so there we are, I'm on the bridge, as if by magic. You get a lovely view. This is a really excellent place, especially on a day like today, to take in the Great West Road. Obviously, you know, so much of it has gone and been replaced and rather messed around with, but you get to see the old Curry's building, which is now JC Deco, and you can see how they adapted that building, because a lot of the stuff behind the building was knocked down and they put a fairly workmanlike building on the back of it. Over in the distance there you can actually see Brentford, and I know that because that spire of the church, but beyond there, that office, what appears to be an office block, was the police station. So that is Brentford over that direction, and all the new developments of Brentford. So we are effectively sort of in Brentford, but we've gone from Chiswick into Brentford, and now we ultimately will end up in Osterley, because on the other side of the road here we're moving up to Osterley, and in the distance there you can see the top of the Gillette building. This vantage point also gives me a nice opportunity to see the old Firestone site. Now, the original Firestone building, the main development of it, which was opened in 1928, so there's the 28th thing here, was in fact the footprint of this new building that's going up. Now that's going to be for Renault. Now what it eventually ends up looking like, I don't know. They're obviously going to put cladding onto it, so perhaps I should give it an opportunity to prove itself, but it is never going to be the original Firestone factory by any shape or means. And I don't know why, when you've got a footprint the size that it is, which I think was the original footprint of the original factory, why don't you put an entrance in the middle? Why have you offset it? It's strange, but it's basically going to be showrooms, offices for Renault UK. But the Firestone factory was actually expanded either side to 2 wings, and so it came out to where Curry's is, and then on the other side equal distance. This wall that goes around, this sort of concrete wall, that is a later addition that must have been done, I would think probably in the 1990s, but the original fence is still there. So yes, you can see that mound there where I was before, that's where the railway bridge would have gone over, and there are pictures of that you can see. But yes, we might as well just walk over and point out the fact that this building was Pyrene's up until 1967, when Chubb took over Pyrene's and expanded the business from sort of home security or security locks, etc., into fire extinguishers. Took over basically Pyrene's business, and Pyrene did so many more things than just fire extinguishers. They actually made firefighting equipment for things like airports, airfields, etc. So they were a big setup, but then Chubb took them over, and literally 1 year after they took over Pyrene's, this building closed down. It sat for a while and was eventually taken over by Tarmac, which is a big construction company, which eventually became Carillion, who went bust a few years back. And in the early 70s they decided to take out the original Crittall windows, which obviously, and if you know what Crittall window is, it's basically metal framed windows that are far more detailed and ornate than these. But Tarmac decided they were going to put in the latest thing, which is bronzed glass, which was stop the sun going in so badly, reflected it, but it completely destroyed the character of the building. But what you can see is that there's obviously an extension there. I don't know when that happened, but I reckon it was possibly 80s, 90s. but you can also see some of the detailing. This is typical Wallace Gilbert and Partners, very much like the Hoover factory, with this sort of green and orange stuff, which is suffering very badly. I will just point out in the few minutes I've got left on this bit of video that you'll notice we are going upwards. There is an incline up to the top of where Osterley Scion Lane is. This is Scion Hill basically, and at the top of it, where the Gillette factory is, used to be Scion Hill Farm. But to actually get up this road, to reduce the amount of incline, they basically cut through, and that's why you have these raised sections. It was literally, the buildings were on a raised pediment, so it appeared. It was just literally where they'd cut through. So I'm going to finish here, and I'm going to do a final video, hopefully. But thank you for watching, and part 4 coming up.